I'm joined by Brooks Mayor Barry Morishita. Welcome, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, thanks for having me, David.
Now, you grew up in Brooks. Just share some of your personal history with the city of Brooks.
Sure. Yeah, so actually, I grew up in a town just a little bit north and west of here, Rosemary. So I grew up in a small town on a farm originally. I'm half Japanese, so my grandparents immigrated to my grandfather actually immigrated to Canada in the early 1900s. My grandmother was born here, but during World War II, they were interned in an internment camp in Tashme, BC. And my dad and my aunt were actually born in the camp. And then in the 1950, they came out to a homestead out here in Patricia, and then subsequently Rosemary. So that's kind of where I grew up. I ended up doing most of my schooling there with a little stint in Brooks while we were moving around a bit. But yeah, so I've lived in the area my whole life.
Now, the city of Brooks is called the City of 100 Hellos. Why is that?
Well, we're very blessed to have a really diverse, multicultural community. When currently JBS was Lakeside, we had some expansion, and it was tough to find workers, and so they recruited a lot of overseas, and that's been a continuation of that for the last 20 years, and we've got a lot of different cultures, different languages, and different people from around the world represented right here in our small city.
The Premier stopped in for a visit not too long ago. Why did he come down?
He was doing a bit of a tour during their break in session and doing a Southern Alberta swing. And he came by. We talked about economic development and recovery and relaunch. He actually complimented the city on how we handled the COVID-19 outbreak that we had. We talked about some issues provincially with regards to changes in legislation, but mostly we spent a lot of time talking about how we're going to relaunch the economy and how we can work together to do that.
Now, how did COVID-19 affect the city of Brooks?
Well, as you know, we probably had one of the largest outbreaks in North America in terms of people per 100,000 in terms of total concentration. We had 1,100 cases at its peak. We had nearly 900 active cases at the peak. So it was a big event, very interesting situation for us to deal with. We had to really rely on our stakeholder partners, the provincial government, AHS, to get some things done. And I think we did a really good job. I think we saw how important testing was. We really pushed hard to have the asymptomatic testing, which was the first of its kind that we're aware of, certainly in the province and maybe even in the country. We had tested nearly 3,500 people the first time, and it makes a big difference. So I think those are lessons learned. And the other thing that I think people really pulled together, it was a frightening because of so many unknowns about the coronavirus at the time, how it would really affect people and what the conditions could devolve into. But I think we handled it really well. I think our community pulled together like a community does, and the community is stronger and really understands what's going on, and you can see it in the streets.
I think that's one of the most amazing stories to come out of this whole outbreak in Brooks is the way people pulled together. And we're going to be highlighting some of those. So tell me some of the stories of people assisting others in the community.
It was David. It was really amazing. We had some a local here do a shout out every day for workers and for donations and just general feel good stories every day. We had people come from Calgary. We had immigrant societies. We had Filipino communities preparing food and meals and helping out. We had PPE, protection equipment flown in from Calgary. We had donations made. We had local firms reach out and make donations to help us through this. The list is actually endless. Locals making masks, and it was amazing, amazing, amazing. That's all I can say about it. It's an incredible outpouring. of compassion and empathy and understanding. And I've never been prouder of my community.
Let's talk about this a little bit more. There was a pilot named Jack that flew in from the Calgary Chinese Dongbei Association and donated masks and PPE. It was an amazing story in itself.
Yeah, I received an email from somebody I had no idea, and said they were aware of our situation through the media, and the really heartwarming part of this is these are there was a group of three people that came, two pilots and somebody representing the association, and the two pilots are unemployed. So it's not like they had they might have had some time, but certainly resources when you're faced with the uncertainty we have had over the economics of coronavirus. It's really quite scary to think about it. And they were taking their time to raise money and receive donations, and coming out to Brooks like that, just saying, hey, looks like you need some help, and for people to notice that and then act on it, just an incredible. It really. Every day there was something that kept you going, because some days we were spending 12 or 16 hours dealing with what was going on, and trying to keep things under control, and working out new ways of trying to deal with isolation and the costs and all of the things were happening. And then almost every day there was one of these situations come up, whether it was the County of Newell stepping up and helping with the test center, whether it was our city staff who worked just an incredible amount of hours to make sure people were informed. And then I would get notes, got notes from your mayor in Medicine Hat, and from my peer group through the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association. It's amazing how many people do, and you think you're alone and by yourself, which I can tell you many times during the COVID-19, it felt like we were alone and by ourselves. Somebody would come along and say you're not, and yeah, it got us through. It certainly got me through.
I think another amazing group from Calgary that came down and donated groceries was the Calgary Filipino Association. Do you want to share a little bit more about their story?
Yeah, so the Filipino population here was greatly affected by coronavirus. As there were several hundred cases associated with people that worked at JBS, and it spread through the community very rapidly. And in some cases, families were isolated for, sometimes 14, 28 days because it would go through their households. And I think the first, these were they're unsolicited. And I think that makes them unbelievably valuable, not just in the sense of the receiving it, but just the sense that recognizing you need help and then just helping. And they brought food for hundreds of families over 2 consecutive weekends. Different Filipino groups did that. We showed up in a parking lot at the Safeway, and there were 4 vehicles packed with food, and food that that community is used to, which again is something so thoughtful. Food is comfort, as you may or may not know. I know it is for me from time to time, and we have our cultural attachments to food, and they do too. And for that community to step up and recognize, and then dozens of volunteers showed up from here to hand deliver those packages, and just amazing. This is really amazing.
There was several groups and businesses within Brooks that stepped up and donated PPE. So Frontier Safety, Brooks Industrial Metals, Canadian Tire, Paramount Mechanical, Compass Geomatics, Divine Nails, Brooks Auto Parts, Heritage Food and Health, Certified Radio, and Duffy's Fund Center. For businesses who know that they're going to need the PPE, but right now put aside that and donate, it says so much about your business group in Brooks.
Yeah, no, again, when we needed it to be prepared just to help out people in households, so much showed up. There was a hand sanitizer shortfall, and we had Pivot Spirits who were just opening their doors, timing through the pandemic, switched their operation. They hadn't even made any of their vodka at the time yet, but they were the distillery was making hand sanitizer, packaging it up and delivering it to the city, delivering it to the Newbrook Lodge. Prior to even turning the tap on, so to speak, in their distillery. It's endless. Then we had they partnered with a local firm here, Allied Distributors in town, and they were selling the sanitizer and donating the money. Canadian Tire stepped up and donated pails of hand sanitizer. We had local firms building sanitizing stations. It was unbelievable, really, how our community looked around and just saw, what can I do? And they just went and did it. Businesses that were closed, the nail studio that was closed and had the surgical masks that they used for their operations, like you said, knew they would need them at some point, hopefully when the relaunch started, but they just gave them all away. And we were able to distribute them for all kinds of things. And I sometimes just left you speechless. I'd sit in my chair someday and just go, wow, just amazing.
For the Newbrook Lodge, the Tilly 4-H members held a bottle drive and with the proceeds bought several board games and outside activities for the residents.
Yeah, that's, again, just the thoughtfulness of it. All of those groups, too, were isolated. They didn't have their regular activities going on, whether it was sales and their regular meetings, and yet still they thought about how they can serve the community. And 4-H, as you know, has always been an amazing group. Part of the community, do a lot of community good, and then it was thoughtful. The seniors had to be isolated, they were shut down, no visitors, so to bring the games and give them opportunities for different kinds of entertainment, again, just a thoughtful, personal approach. I don't know, sometimes the words don't actually explain what happened in those situations. You'd see that picture and you'd go, wow. A person turned 100 years old at the lodge during the pandemic. And we had a big parade and the fire department showed up and the RCMP marched and there was a piper and your heart's right in your throat when you see that kind of thing happening, and people giving so much of their own time and treasure to serve others. And I think it really illustrated how great a community the city of Brooks is and the surrounding area and the province and the country. And if while we don't want to live in a pandemic forever, it certainly brought out the best in a lot of us, and it's really great to see. And I hope people remember these lessons, and we keep moving forward with the same type of compassion and caring for each other, because it'll make a huge difference in the world going forward.
Definitely will. One group I did miss to mention is the Center for Newcomers, who collaborated with Action Dignity to deliver over 100 food packages to families in Brooks too, as well.
Yeah, Samra, I think is her name. She was amazing. Again, saw the story on the news and then just asked themselves, what can I do? And they have a social agency business that's this food catering company, and they again, hundreds of pounds of food, 2 trucks full. Brought volunteers down, and then again connected here, and dozens more volunteers showed up to deliver. And Calgary was going through a bit of the same situation. I mean, certainly not on the scale we were relative to our population, but they were having outbreak as well. And again, I can't compliment the city of Calgary enough, the residents there that really stepped up. And one great story that I heard during that was they have a driver that collects food, and he's of Asian descent, and there's been some terrible situations where people have looked at people and by the way they look have said, go home and those kinds of things. And when I asked him why he does what he do, he just says, it's more important. This is more important work. And people that make those comments don't understand, aren't educated about what's actually going on. And Canada's a mosaic of people who have come from other places to make a better life for themselves. It continues on. We talk about that spirit of breaking through and frontier and all that stuff, but ours is still here. That notion that you can make yourself a better life in Canada still exists, and it's still the prevalent feeling. And I think it was so well illustrated in the last 10 weeks here in the city of Brooks. I hope people come to listen to the story you're telling today, David, and then they come back to Brooks and they can see why that population is so important and how much they care about this country, for sure.
A number of organizations donated funds to help the community of Brooks. TC Energy donated funds to the Community Response Committee. The Knights of Columbus donated to the Brooks Food Bank and St. Vincent de Paul. Harwood Ford donated their Lend a Van. How much did this support from these groups and others help your community?
Well, I think as we were in a state of local emergency and the city was, spending a lot of money on isolation centers and testing and other things, it was amazing to see, again, companies that had some extra money to donate to us. I think, you mentioned a few of them, and all of that stuff has come to help the community broadly in all kinds of ways. It's purchased PPE, it's helped people isolate, it's helped people get better, and it's helped the community get back on its feet quicker. Our relaunch is on its way, and all of those efforts have made a difference. I think it's interesting to note, too, that JBS, even through the struggles of losing workforce and kind of struggling to make sure that their business as an essential service kept operating, providing food for Canadians, they still managed to make a $50,000 donation to the food bank. And subsequently, they've donated another $25,000 to help with the isolation center costs. And we often look at how much is given, but I think the reasons why is really more important. That they saw a need, they reached in as deep as they could, and whether it was $100 or $50,000, there were a lot of groups and businesses that showed up and contributed. And you know what? Again, it makes us better. It's going to make us better faster. And all of those efforts are multiplied by tenfold because of what happened during the pandemic. Our workers, doctors, nurses, anybody that was working at the hospital or the lodge, they were in the middle of it all, and they had so much responsibility. They're bearing the load of caring for people who are vulnerable, the most susceptible to COVID-19. And day in and day out, they were, wearing PPE and stories of, their ears were raw and their cheeks were raw. And, when all of this was peaking out, and had to be hyper vigilant about everything. And some were separated from their families for days at a time or even weeks at a time, to make sure that they were keeping themselves safe and the people they were working with safe individually, and even all the essential workers as well. You had store clerks and all those essential businesses that were left open and that had to rise up beyond what they normally do and show up to work when everybody else was at home and deal with the potential danger of getting the disease when they it just makes me gasp just with amazement that so much self-sacrifice was made here. Doctors that didn't take any time off, nurses that worked long hours, and then still had time to come on and talk to us about what was happening in the community, to explain to us how coronavirus works, to educate people and make sure they had the knowledge that made them able to cope with these situations just everybody did everything they could. And the RCMP, our bylaw officers that were out there, the fire department that helped us with when we were at our peak, and they were handing out PPE at stores and babysitting so people didn't have to bring their kids into a store. Just the little things made life very, very doable on a day-to-day basis by all they did collectively. I don't know if you could ever quantify it, David. It would be kind of cool to do it someday to try to figure it out, but immense, large, without equal, I would say, the efforts that were put forward by the people in this community.
Now, in summary and conclusion, what's your personal thoughts and reflections over this outbreak and how people have come together?
Just it's. I always have been very proud to be the mayor of the city of Brooks, but certainly never prouder than during this. When you think people can do a lot, they just do a little bit more, and I'm going to be forever grateful. As hard as the experience was, I'll be forever grateful.
How has this changed your life?
It's changed it in the sense of what I think the possibilities are. I've always been very optimistic, and I've always been very positive about the future of both the city and this province and the country, my own family and whatever. But excuse me. I just think it's broadened the possibilities. I don't think anything is impossible for a community to get through now. If I would imagine, you imagine you do disaster planning, you do tabletop exercises. This community came together for Fort McMurray. Was that 6 years ago now, I think. Raised $100,000 in a day for Fort McMurray, and people like Mark Tanagami at Frontier arranged to get all that stuff up to Fort Mac, and happened in a very short period of time. And you think, man, that's just amazing. And then something else comes along, and there's more amazement. So I think the possibilities, and we should spend a little bit more time, I think, in terms of that. Is let's not talk about why we can't do things. Let's try to have the conversation about why we can, how we can. We've proved we can, and we shouldn't be afraid of stepping into that and getting all those things done that we think need to be to make our community the very best place it can be.